everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Judge Janine Pirro, Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five.
You may remember I got criticized for calling Putin a war criminal. Well, the truth of the matter, you saw what happened in Bucha. This warrants him. He is a war criminal. We have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous. And everyone's seen it.
What are you going to do?
President Biden demanding a war crimes trial for Vladimir Putin after images of Russia's atrocities in Ukraine shocked the conscience of the world. Viewer warning, these are extremely disturbing pictures. Civilians found tortured and massacred by Russian troops in the city of Bucha. Their hands bound behind their backs, discarded in the streets after the Russians withdrew from that city and other suburbs around Kyiv. Ukrainian officials say they have found over 400 bodies in that area. President Zelensky calling the massacre a genocide, pleading for more support during last night's Grammy Awards.
Our musicians wear body armor instead of tuxedo. They sing to the wounded in hospitals. Tell the truth about the war on your social networks, on TV. Support us in any way you can, but not silence.
Russia is not taking responsibility for the vicious attacks, saying the images are fake. Harold Ford Jr., it's good to have you back with us. Some thoughts on, reflections on that, and perhaps also on the financial angle in regards to the sanctions.
So first off, good to be back at the table. I'm pleased to see the president say what he's saying. He is a war criminal. We banded around at this table for weeks now on this matter, and we've all agreed from the very beginning. Two, I think it's now time to think about doing more. And doing more comes with risk. We know the escalation challenges or escalation questions and what that could do in terms of triggering perhaps the use of a light nuclear weapon or even a larger nuclear weapon. But the declaration of him as a war criminal, I think, escalates what we can do and how we can do it. I think some of the criticism of the president in the White House will continue. And I think the criticism, if people are honest about it, should focus more constructively on, are we prepared for the consequences if we do something? And meaning if we send airplanes. I doubt we will enforce a no-fly zone, but if we send airplanes and more technology and more weaponry, are we as a nation prepared for what could come from that, be it a military reaction from the Russians? You talk about the economics. I look at the economics more so from the standpoint, if they turn off the spigots or they do not, they force people to pay for natural gas and energy products in rubles, this will impact NATO. So we have to be prepared not only as a nation, but even our NATO allies and what may happen. But let me be clear. I think we should do more. Those images there suggest to me in the strongest of ways that Putin, if he is unhinged, if he's nuts, we can debate that. I think he is. One thing is clear. He's not going to stop. And we have to be willing to do something more to counter him.
Jesse, listen to Jake Sullivan. He's the president's national security advisor earlier today.
Based on what we have seen so far, we have seen atrocities, we have seen war crimes, we have not yet seen a level of systematic deprivation of life of the Ukrainian people to rise to the level of genocide. But again, that's something we will continue to monitor. There is not a mechanical formula for this.
So monitoring a genocide is an escalation.
Yeah, I see what he said, though. He's splitting hairs because this is a legal situation if it's a war crime situation. And we've only had, what, recently, too? You had Rwanda, you had a tribunal, and then in Yugoslavia, you had an international criminal tribunal. Those were internationally sanctioned. Now, we don't do business with the International Criminal Court. Russia doesn't do business with them either. And Russia would veto, since it's on the Security Council, any sort of international tribunal to hold themselves accountable. So I don't know exactly where that goes. Plus, it's kind of hard to extradite Putin from Moscow. Maybe you could nab a general in the east and the Donbass. Who knows? It's very difficult. I'm glad we showed the graphic footage of the dead bodies, because when the country and the world sees that, it makes people fully understand the truth, and it makes people take action. And if we had only shown maybe drug overdoses in the American inner cities, gun violence, actual dead bodies in the inner cities, maybe that would galvanize the American people to do something about violence in this country. Just a thought I had. It does look like, though, we are escalating with the tanks. So tanks are not a defensive weapon. and we are intermediaries in moving tanks from the European countries, Soviet-made, into Ukraine, that tells me this. That tells me the West thinks that Russia could lose this thing, and that the Ukrainians aren't going to be fighting an insurgency. They might actually fight and possibly win a conventional war. So that's pretty big. I think jets are next. I think we're this close to jets if the Russians keep getting pushed back.
You mean a no-fly zone or jets?
No, not a no-fly zone, but actual jet transfers. We're inching closer, and I hope everybody understands the risk there.
Judge Janine, do you look at this, on the legal front, what she was talking about in terms of the tribunal and the question of is it genocide, then there are consequences. But also, I know that you're very moved after seeing all of that.
Well, I think we all are. I think anyone who has seen people with their hands tied behind their back and a bullet to the back of their head knows this is an execution. I don't think the war tribunal is sufficient for this man. And let me make one thing clear. Putin is the same guy he's been for the last 20 years. He didn't just change. He didn't just start committing war crimes. But this is a guy who went into Crimea and Georgia and Syria and committed the same kinds of crimes. It's just now that we're seeing it 24/7, 7 days a week. We're seeing the pain. We're hearing it. We're a part of it. And for him to say, you know, I'm not sure this is genocide, it depends on the level. Let me read you what the definition of genocide is from the War Crime Tribunal. It's characterized by a specific intent to destroy in whole or part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group by killing its members or other means causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Now, I mean, there isn't a number. There isn't a particular equation that you can use. But I can tell you this. After the war in Bosnia, I was contacted by the State Department, by the Department of Defense, to interview, along with prosecutors from my office, victims so that we could prepare their file to be included in the War Crime Tribunal in The Hague. I spent weeks with my staff interviewing victims of the most horrific crimes you could imagine. These people were isolated. The victims were horrified. They were ashamed. We used translators. The stories that we heard are horrible. This kind of thing is not new to the world. It's happened before. This guy has to be stopped. I don't like the idea of the niceties of a war crime tribunal. It's about time that this was taken more seriously, that the United States gets involved, not to the point of pushing him because of his nuclear weapons. But let's make one thing clear. Putin has had nuclear weapons for a long time. He hasn't used them before. And now all of a sudden, because Biden, we're afraid of them. We weren't afraid when we went into Syria and we got rid of those chemical weapons when Russia was involved. But that was a different president. Another thing that's different, Greg, is the whole this is like the first war that you see that's like wired. Elon Musk has the satellites there that are helping the internet links stay up. You have hackers that are actually participating all around the world trying to hack into Russia's systems. So it is a very different situation as you see the images come through, but there's also this weird participation on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, there's a battle over turf, but there's a battle over ideas. And obviously, I mean, you cannot but be grossed out and sickened by those images, but you shouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's amazing how evil humans can be in war. I mean, think about the stuff that no one films, stuff you don't see. That's stuff we saw. You didn't see what happened before. So I don't think we have to wonder or dwell too much on the atrocities that are happening, because they're going to happen every day. And we're going to be sitting here, we're going to be looking at that, and we're going to have to ask ourselves, how does that impact our behavior here, right? We talked about this at the beginning. There's like a three-step process. You decide who wants it more, and then you steel yourself for the horrific details to come, and then you decide your involvement, should there be any. I think where we are is, at this table and elsewhere, I think we know what we want, but it's not what we decided, right? We want Ukraine to win. We definitely, but we haven't decided to help them win.
Help them do it.
So the thing is, this means, as Jake Sullivan said, this is to be a protracted thing, because what we want and what we decide, there's a huge gulf.
Right.
And we have to decide, what is it we want?
Right.
Do we want to go there, or do we want to stay here? Because I've said this before. I don't know who's winning or who's losing. I wish I knew. In 1 minute, I will hear the most optimistic Ukrainian outcome. The Russians are on the run, and then followed by, no, that's the calm before the Grozny storm. This is when they go back and they come back and they flatten. So the weird thing about it is it could look like the first one, but be the second one. And that's what scares me most about it. And I think initially why I was so hesitant about, like, is it better for a capitulation? Is it better for negotiation? Or is it something that we can't reconcile between what we want and what we decide? I think Putin's decided. We haven't.
And it's not been clear. And helping them lose more slowly is not help.
Yeah, that's the conflict that goes on. But like you said at the beginning of this this whole phenomenon, it's a battle between your mind and your heart.
Yeah. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.